Today we're out in Montana feeling the winds of change, and hopefully those winds aren't blowing too loudly into the microphone. But on more than one occasion, a brand says we have an all-new model, a next generation, and when you get there, it's maybe a little bit underwhelming. But Volkswagen says the revisions made to the Tiguan put it into the third generation, but I actually think they might be underselling it a little bit. For 2025, we have some exterior changes, some big changes to the way it feels from inside the vehicle, and more happening underneath the surface. So let's go ahead and dive on in and see what they've done for 2025. Now, in all fairness, today we really only get a chance to look at the SEL R line, which is always going to be the sportier, more aggressive look. But the whole front end design, and mostly what I'm referring to is this enormous black space up front, is going to carry over from model to model, although there are maybe some tweaks depending on that specific trim. But this black space does something a little bit interesting because visually it just changes where you're looking at and the overall shape of the car, because it seems like it sits up a lot higher, or there's like this second shelf design, and I'm not totally sure I'm sold on it, but I've seen other designs that are more clearly not to my liking, and this one I want to spend a little bit more time with. So let me know what you think down in the comment section below. One thing I enjoy about the design here is that it helps highlight some of the lighting, and we have really strong lighting running across this front end, not just in these DRLs in the headlight assembly, but also a light bar that runs out front and your illuminated front emblem. Since we have the top end R line, it would stand to reason that we have the most aggressive wheel and tire package, and that is in fact the case, which means a 20-inch wheel and a 255 width tire. If you go with an 18 or 19-inch wheel, that's a 235 width tire. If you get that base model S, that comes with a 17-inch wheel and a 215 width tire, which is not going to give you the same kind of handling, but it is going to get you some better fuel economy.
Now, some of the biggest changes for the exterior are going to be found not only in the front, but also in the back. Now, LEDs are going to make a very heavy appearance here on the 25 model year. LEDs flowing from the passenger side all the way to the driver's side and pretty much connecting all the way through. You have illuminated logos in the back and in the front, and you have your badging indicating it's all-wheel drive, 4Motion, SEL, your trim level, and Tiguan underneath that red illuminated Volkswagen logo. Now, some of the main changes back here are going to be, it has a shorter overhang, like I mentioned, it's about 2 inches shorter, thanks to it being built and not having a third row and being built on the MQB Evo platform, similar to what you have the GTI and Golf R built off of. They shorten it a little bit, and they're able to increase the tow capacity as well. Some suspension changes and that new platform increase the tow capacity for the all-wheel drive from 15 to 1,800 pounds. So an increase of over 300, that's pretty decent. But if you wanted to go for a front-wheel drive in any of the other trims, you're going to be looking at a maximum capacity up to 1,500 pounds. Now, all the way to the bottom, you're not going to see any visible exhaust tips because they are tucked away underneath, which I actually don't mind. If you're going to do fake outlets down here, I would rather just not have those and tuck them away. So I'm glad they went that route and didn't give us any sort of faux exhaust outlet. And what they have done is give us kind of a fake grille look on this rear bumper, and that's going to be found on almost all of the trims. I'm not necessarily a huge fan of it, but I would much rather prefer this than a unpainted plastic portion. Just for a quick correction, we do have a SE trim here. This is our first look at a lower model trim, and it does have a different rear fascia, and the front has changed just slightly. Now, the lighting is a tad bit different as well, but LEDs nonetheless, so you are going to get that premium taillight and headlight functionality, whether you go for the S, SE, or the SEL. So if you are looking for something that's super premium looking, you're going to want to go for that SEL R line. As you can see here on this SE, you're going to have different headlights, and you're also going to have a different front end. It's not going to be as bold and brash. It's going to be a little bit more subdued, like I mentioned, but nonetheless, it still looks fantastic altogether. Now, the SEL R line is going to get this feature, an automatic liftgate, and that is not going to be found on any of the other trims. So that's a nice feature to have, makes life a little bit easier, and gives you those creature comforts you're looking for when spending nearly $40,000. Now, when you open up the rear cargo area, there is a decent amount of space. You have your cargo protector that just attaches to the liftgate itself. You can take that off easily and store that away in your garage. But in terms of cargo space, like mentioned, we don't have exact numbers, as they have decreased the overall length, the rear overhang, by about 2 inches. You can maybe suspect a little bit less, but if it's the same as last year, we're looking at 33 cubic feet behind the second row and 73.4 inches, or cubic feet, excuse me, behind the first row. Now, that is pretty good in comparison to the CRV, RAV4, CX-5, Forester. It's actually going to be more than both the CX-5 and Forester, but kind of in between on the other two competitors. Now, inside, there's not a ton of amenities. You have 2 LED lights, one off to the driver and one off to the passenger side to illuminate your rear cargo area. Some nice little cubby spots off to the side. I'll let Travis come in and take a look at those. And as well, on the driver's side, there is a 12-volt outlet if you wanted to charge some items. Other than that, it's pretty simple, and you can fold down your 60-40 split seats. Go ahead and press that, and that detaches those. There is something in that seat, so it's not going to go all the way down. But overall, a decent amount of space, and if you really wanted to maximize it, you could take the spare tire out, risk it, and have some more cargo area. But there is going to be a subwoofer in there for this trim, as we do have the Harman Kardon premium sound system. If you go ahead and pop open the hood, we're going to expose the power plant, which is a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder. Now, if you're familiar with the Tiguan and other Volkswagen vehicles, this is a similar motor to what is found in a couple of different vehicles, including the Tiguan, but it's going to be pretty much fully refined for the 25 model year. New internals, a lot more trick stuff, and a new turbocharger increases the horsepower about 17. Getting us 201 horsepower here paired to an 8-speed automatic transmission. It's going to get you around 25 miles per gallon on the highway. But if you wanted more economy, you can go for the lower trims, which you can equip with front-wheel drive, and that'll get you either 29 miles per gallon or 28 miles per gallon combined, which will be a 2 mile per gallon improvement over past years. Now, if you need more horsepower than 201, well, lucky for you, there is going to be hope at the end of the tunnel, and that is going to be in the 26 model year, where they give us the turbo trim. It's going to be around 260 to 270 horsepower. But until then, 201's all we got. Overall, I think it's fairly peppy, even up here at around 5,000 to 6,000 feet elevation.
On the top end trim here, we have tons of adjustability when it comes to the seating. We have 12-way power adjustment, including a 4-way lumbar support and a massage button you'll find located right about here. Now, whatever your favorite position is, you'll be able to save it in one of 3 different ways. That's for the driver and the passenger over there, but that's not going to include the controls or the saved file there for the steering wheel, because that is a manual tilt and telescopic steering wheel. When it comes to the overall space in here, the only thing I wish is that I could lower this seat just a little bit. And that's not because I'm running out of room, just because I'd want a little bit more space, just my preferred driving position. If I sit bolt upright, I have still about 2 or 3 inches. And even though this is a car that has some of the lowest front legroom in its class, I still feel like I have plenty of room. Now, if I want to slide this all the way back, for folks who have really, really, really long legs, you might feel like you're running out of room, but so far I think it's gonna be pretty good for most folks.
Now, the second row is pretty comfortable. It has a pretty reclined position. There is no reclining, as it is a fixed position, but it doesn't really matter to me personally because it is pretty reclined to start with. Now, legroom is going to be one of the smallest measurements in terms of this compact crossover segment, comparing it to a RAV4 CR-V CX-5 Forester. The only measurement that's going to be smaller is going to be found in the RAV4. But actually, the numbers are kind of lying, because I would say that this is some of the best space that I have found in this crossover segment. I can fit my feet real nicely underneath the front, and that's something that I don't find all that often, whether there's amplifiers under there or HVAC. This is just a real nice functionality. Now, there is going to be a large hump in the middle because it is all-wheel drive, so if you have 3 people sitting in the back seat, it is going to be awfully tight.
Here on the interior, pretty much everything is brand new, especially this layout. And I want to start with this incredibly large infotainment screen. And that's not just large and in charge, but for the size, it's got quite a presence. This is a 15-inch screen. The other units, the lower end trims, will get something a little bit smaller, but all of them are going to get wireless CarPlay and Android Auto. So lots of real estate for hopefully your phone and what you want in front of there. One thing missing here on this screen is going to be controls, or at least touch controls in dials and switches, because if you wanted to do things like change your climate control, it's either a tap or a slide here on these bars. You get one for the driver, one for the passenger. Same thing for your volume. Tap up or tap down, or slide up or slide down. Maybe not everyone's favorite, but there are going to be switches lower down in that center console. So we'll go there right now. Here in the center console, we have sort of a vertically stacked cup holder layout, not side by side, which tells you this isn't a very large vehicle. It's not incredibly wide, but they also aren't taking up any space, so you get a little bit more legroom that way. You can see there I've got my phone in a little slot here, great for a quick knick-knack throwing in. And then here in your center here, that's where most of the rest of the controls, or the physical controls, are that the driver's going to use more regularly. Your engine start stop, no longer will you find the gear selector here. That's going to be located up on the steering wheel, but we'll get there in a second. This knob is going to be your volume knob, as it says volume, but if you press it down, it's either going to switch between your drive modes or your atmospheres. And atmospheres is a new feature here in the Volkswagens. What you can do is change sort of the appearance and really it's a vibe, because not only is it going to change some of the lighting here, some of the ambient lighting, but also some of the sound. So it'll change your audio settings. You can, of course, go in and set one for me, so you get to pick your own. And for me, I would rather have the lights be what I want them to be and not change the sound accordingly. So that's probably where I would end up. But as I mentioned, we also have, by swiping over here, your driver modes. There's comfort, sport, custom, off-road, and snow. Of course, we have an eco there as well, but we haven't spent any time in that one today. Under the center armrest, we have quite a bit of storage space. We'll go ahead and slide out this divider here, and you can see there's a fair amount of room for a vehicle not terribly large, including a lot of power options. Nick's got his phone charging there. Standard is going to be a 15-watt wireless charger, and we have 2 USB-C ports there as well, and then there in the back, you get your 12-volt power. But we also get the ratcheting center armrest, so that'll slide forward and backward and ratchet at different levels, so you should be able to find a pretty comfortable place for your arm. From the driver's view, one of the first things you'll notice is going to be the steering wheel, and it is a pretty typical Volkswagen design, but certainly not a bad thing. We do have some great hand grips up here, so if you like to be at 10 and 2, you'll find this pretty comfortable. When we come in a little bit closer, one of the things I don't love is how much button action is happening here and sort of how they're divided up. On the left side are controls for things like your adaptive cruise control, and that's pretty simple. But this slider here, or this bar, is going to be what you find for your volume. It isn't a slider, it is a press. But volume, I think, should be over here where we have rest of the controls for our infotainment. So track forward and backward is going to be located here. And then just above that, things like your voice commands, as well as the change of view for this digital gauge cluster. Now that gauge cluster is all new. It's a 10.2-inch screen, and you can do quite a bit with it. So if I cycle through some of these center options, you can see it'll change quite a bit, including to a full map view or some of the basic information that we have displayed in front of us. We can also change the view altogether. So that's more of a traditional layout. This I would call a little bit more simplified. And then here's just a different way to break things up, obviously highlighting things like your performance. This isn't the last screen you'll find here, because not only do we have one on that knob that we looked at earlier, but we also have a heads-up display, just unfortunately not one I can show in front of you. But no matter how you want your directions, you'll find a way to do it here, because as you saw earlier, you can do a full screen map layout. You can also do maps on the center console, and you can get your turn-by-turn directions there in the heads-up display.
Not only is the dashboard chock full of all new screens and technology, but we also get premium materials. That wood trim and that chrome accent goes from the driver all the way to the passenger side. That piped leather material up above the glove box and that gloss black insert on the dashboard is housing your ambient lighting. Here on the top trim, you get over 30 ambient colors that you can choose from, changing the overall vibe of the interior at your own liking. Now that flows onto the door panel, premium materials and speaker grills found there. And if you look at the seats, these are going to be genuine leather, quilted leather, perforated because you have heating and cooling functionality, with the massage functionality finding itself on the driver and even over here on the passenger side.
Well, we're out on the road, and even though we have an improved 2-liter turbo and we've got 201 horsepower, we're also cruising about 6,500 feet of elevation, and that's not quite ideal.
No, I mean, doing a 0 to 60 test, we got 9.3 seconds was our fastest. Now, I know for sure at sea level, this is going to do much better than that. Now, how much better? Not quite sure. And how much better is it going to be than the previous generation? Well, I'm not quite sure of that either. What I can tell you is even up at this elevation, once you're cruising down the road, it's 50, 60, 70 miles an hour. It does have a decent bit of passing speed. Now, with that 8-speed transmission, it can really find the perfect gear to be in. I would say that if you went 10 speeds, it'd be too much, and a 6-speed would be too little. It's kind of that sweet spot here in the 8-speed transmission. What's your thoughts? You drove it a little bit earlier off camera.
They put a lot of work into it, and like you said, it's not going to be one that launches you off the line, but there's plenty of pep once you get going. So what I'm excited about, or what I'm curious about, is other engine options down the road. And we may have alluded to it a little bit earlier, but Volkswagen seems to be confident that in 2026, we'll have the 268 horsepower turbo engine making its way into this vehicle. Now, that's obviously going to be a top performer in the class, obviously the most powerful version you can get at Tiguan. But what it's also missing, and a lot of the competitors have this, is a hybrid engine.
Yeah, they didn't say it wasn't happening. They just said it'll come later. So they are planning on doing it, and that's part of the reason why they went to this MQB Evo platform, is because it is an electrified able platform. They have plug-in hybrids and diesels and a bunch of different other powertrain options in different countries around the world. But here in the US, we only get the 2-liter turbo, which if we were to get anything, I'm glad we got this one. The diesel would be cool, but
That's not happening.
We know Volkswagen and diesel are two words that don't go together
not
very
here
well.
in the U.S.
Yeah, it's a little harsh.
But engine aside, this car handles really nicely, and they have made some changes. Like I said, a new chassis layout, refined suspension, and even though there isn't a performance or a sports trim, and let me backtrack real quick. We have the R line, but it's not an R. And just like a lot of manufacturers, the line means that it's looking sporty and it's feeling sporty, but it's not necessarily any more so.
Yeah, it's more of a feature rather than a function.
Yeah, so here, you don't have to have the highest performance model to have a good time behind the wheel, as long as you don't mind a little bit slower 0 to 60.
No, and one thing that I will point out is when we do get that turbo, it's not necessarily it might happen. It is happening. They even had a version at auto shows. So later in 2025, Q4 most likely, you will see that turbo start to be a little bit more prevalent, whether it's in reviews or even on dealer lots. But one thing that I am hoping for is maybe not in 2026, but maybe 27 or 28, is we see something closer to what you would find in a Tiguan R. So something more performance oriented.
Even though we don't have a full performance version available, we do have, like I said, the R-Line as it stands, which means we've got 20-inch wheels, a little bit less tire for some absorption, but this is handling also very nicely. So not just in the corners, but also on broken pavement. And these roads are not always the best maintained. We've hit some serious potholes, we've hit some pretty uneven roads, and it's been comfortable the entire way through.
Yeah, the suspension is actually pretty well tuned to be kind of a best of both worlds situation where it doesn't roll too much in corners. The road itself, the road surface, feels fairly smooth. There is a little bit of road noise on certain road conditions, but it's actually not that bad. And since we are in the top trim, we are getting a little bit more sound deadening, just premium materials that are keeping that noise to the outside. One thing to point out that we briefly touched on earlier is that we are in the top trim, so we are getting the most aggressive, the most in-your-face exterior styling, and that is going to have kind of that gloss black treatment on the front and those crazy lights out back. You're not going to find that on all trims. Each trim is going to have its respective fascias in the front and in the rear, and it really does give you kind of an adjustability or kind of variability to find what you prefer, because I know that this new design isn't necessarily people's favorite in pictures, but once you see it in person, I think personally this is the best looking Tiguan so far. Now, what do you think? We saw briefly an SE that has a different front and rear fascia, not as much gloss black, not as much craziness with the LED lights. What is your take? Which would you take if you were to buy yourself a Volkswagen Tiguan for the 25 model year?
You know, I'm a little bit torn because I usually like things to be a little bit tamer for what's in the driveway, but I love the LED lighting, and if I had to get the louder kind of larger black portions of the front and the rear to get that lighting, that's probably the direction I would go. And for the dollar, this is a really loaded car. I mean, it may not be the best of every feature, but it's got a lot of features. It checks a lot of boxes, but it also makes it one of the more premium offerings in this segment. And that's where things get a little bit tough, because when you have, let's just say on paper, this is the best of every single subcompact SUV. But the problem is it's not the most affordable. And therefore, kind of by default, it's not going to sell as many units. And that's where you have to find that fine line. So you can get an SE and get a really nice Tiguan, but if you start getting up there with the SEL R-Line, then you start to spend quite a bit of money where you could be looking at a whole other vehicle.
Yeah, you start getting into the $40,000 range, but what I will say, I'll kind of have to back up the Volkswagen Tiguan a little bit, because you are getting very premium interior in this. Like, compared to its competitors, the RAV4, let's just name some of them. So the RAV4, the CR-V, I almost said MX-5, CX-5, and the Forester, this for me by far is the nicest interior, bar none. I'm getting my back massaged in this seat right now. Travis can do the same. The rear passengers can have their heated seats. I can even have the cooled function on at the same time. So it's like those tiny little nuances in the interior kind of elevate it almost to a different category, into a luxury category, say.
Or at least a premium category.
Yeah, like, you know, the big brother, the fancier version of this is the Audi Q5. Is it almost there? Maybe it's almost there.
I'll tell you what.
The Q5 can take it leaps and bounds further as well.
The thing that I'm getting from this interior is that it almost feels like a living room. And it's this walnut wood is wonderful. And I'm not even the biggest wood fan, but we've seen so much gloss black recently. We've seen a lot of the same textures and materials. And this layout feels like it's nice and open and warm. The only thing that draws me back a little bit is this really big screen. We saw that smaller screen on the other model, and that felt a little bit more comfortable to me. It felt like a better fit, but I know we collectively love our screens. So, and you get the top end model, you probably want more.
Yeah, I would actually have to agree that this might be just a tad bit too big for how small of the interior is. Now, one thing to point out, and you briefly touched on it earlier during some stand-up, is that this is an important vehicle for Volkswagen. This is the #1 selling vehicle in the whole entire lineup, not in just the US, but also the entire world. But when you talk about numbers, comparing it to some heavy hitter competitors like the RAV4 or CR-V that both sold over 400,000 units in 2024. This, however, sold 95,000. But in terms of Volkswagen sales, this is the best selling. 2024 was the best year for any Volkswagen product or a Tiguan. So nonetheless, this refresh redesign is going to be really substantial to how sales are going to affect the Volkswagen line. So I'm excited to see what this has to offer in terms of sales numbers coming into the next year. I think this is a worthy competitor against some other ones. Now, it doesn't have a sporty trim per se, or sporty oriented trim, or it doesn't have an off-road trim, whereas the CR-V has one, the RAV4 has one, so on and so forth. I could go on with all the small little visual packages that these trims offer, or these vehicles offer, but I think this one is going to hold a pretty decent candle to those heavy hitter competitors like I just mentioned.
The only thing is you got to pay for it. So let's talk about pricing. In the structure of things, every model can come with a front wheel drive except for this top end one. So the front wheel drive is going to start out at $30,920. That gets you into a Tiguan. That's going to be the S trim. If you want all wheel drive, it adds about $1,500, and that gets you $32,430. But I imagine that most folks are going to be looking at the SE or the SE R line black. So SE is going to start out at $34,420. It's about $1,000 add to go to all-wheel drive at that point. That's $35,400. But the R line gets you the snazzier bits. And it's not going to get you the full feature set, but visually speaking, it's going to get you a lot closer to this model than any of the others up to that point. That starts front-wheel drive $36,880, again at about $1,500 if you want all-wheel drive. And that might be the sweet spot, is some of the look of this without all of the feature set, because it is a big feature set. There are a number of ways you can get your Tiguan, but good news is that built into each and every one of these are some of the significant changes that we saw over the previous generation, and some of the features that you'd want, like built-in connectivity for your CarPlay and your Android Auto. That's all wireless, including your wireless charging, which I think is basically a requirement. If you're going to have wireless connectivity, you should also have wireless charging. The other thing is like upgraded safety. So they've gone through and made some changes and added things. So we've got an improved array of airbags. So hopefully if you do end up in an accident, you end up walking away or in a better situation than you did before. Things like parking sensors are all standard. So you don't have to pay a whole lot more or get an excessive trim to get some of the most basic features.
Yeah, now some of the things that you get on this trim that you don't get on the SE R-Line Black is a heated steering wheel, the massage functionality, the 3-seat memory on the passenger side, and the panoramic moonroof is going to be exclusive to the higher end trim. So if you are looking for something that's going to make the interior feel a little bit more airy and spacey, that's going to be necessary, but you're going to have to go to those higher trims.
And since this is the top one, it mostly comes in one way, $41,180, but that is because it comes all-wheel drive only. So it's a couple $1,000s more than the lowest or the next lowest version, but it's probably worth it for folks who aren't looking to get themselves into an Audi name badge or some other luxury car and still want the premium experience.
Yeah, this definitely gives you the best luxury in this segment.
So this is the 3rd generation Tiguan, and so far it's probably my favorite. And it's kind of an interesting bag here because on the outside it looks a little bit different than the last generation, but the overall experience, especially sitting in that driver's seat, feels like this is a big step forward for this model and maybe for Volkswagen in general. Since Tiguan is not only the best-selling model here in the US, it's also globally, it makes sense that this should be in a very good position. And as far as positions go, some of the equipment that you get in here is not going to be found on a lot of the competitors, so this really does feel like a very loaded vehicle. There are going to be a few things missing, and I might be nitpicking just a little bit, and we might see them here in the near future. What we don't see is any sort of off-road trim nor a performance trim, but we've talked about that performance trim potentially being here down the line, not too distant future. We do lose that 3rd row, but I think there's going to be very few folks who are really disappointed in that, and folks who did have the 3rd row, I'm curious how much you used it. If you're one of those, let us know down in the comment section. As long as we keep a lot of the cargo area that we had, and I suspect we will, then this should do very well. And I'll admit, I'm excited to see more beautiful colors like avocado green out on the road. Nick and I know we've mentioned it a couple times, but we have a hard time not talking about it, even when the camera is not rolling. So let us know down in the comments, is this a direction you want to see more Volkswagens go? It does feel a little bit more ID4 and Volkswagen Buzz-ish, but it's still its own thing. We only have one engine option, but more should be on their way soon. And speaking of soon, if you want to go pick one of these up, or at least take it for a test drive, give it about a 10 count, and it should be at your dealerships available for pickup, because these are shipping and delivering right now. Like I said, give it just a few days and you will find them there. If you have any other thoughts, questions, comments, or concerns, let us know down in that comment section below. If you want to see more of us, we have 2 channels plus a podcast. You can also find us on all of our social sites. Thank you so much for watching. Nick and I are going to get out of the rain. See you down the road.